Maybe, you never know.
Okay, so we are live streaming and you can go ahead anytime at 6:30.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, it is 6:30, and so I will call this meeting to order. And first of all, we acknowledge with great respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. So approval of the agenda, if there are no objections or any changes.
Roll call.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
I'm here.
Mayor Martin.
Present.
Councillor Day.
I'm present.
Councillor Jansen.
Here.
Councillor Baxter.
I am here.
Councillor Parkinson.
I'm present.
And myself, we've got a full house. Awesome. All right, now to the approval of the agenda. If there are no errors or admissions, I will consider the agenda approved under unanimous consent. And I'm not seeing any hands going up, so we will so approve. We have one set of minutes from February the 16th, Committee of the Whole. If there are no errors or omissions, we will consider those approved through unanimous consent. And I'm not seeing any hands, so they are so adopted. Public participation. Amanda, do we have anybody registered under public participation?
We do not have anybody registered.
Okay.
And we've not received any written submissions either.
Okay, very good, thank you. So we'll move on to new business, 5.1. A report from Jen Hepting, our Director of Finance on Pacific Center Family Services Association 2022 fee for service. Jen.
Thank you, Chair Logan. I trust everyone can see Budget 2022, Draft Financial Plan version 2.
Yes, we can.
So just take a moment, high level, what we have remaining for us with budget deliberations before we jump into item 5.1. So item 5.1 tonight, we will be reviewing Pacific Center Family Services Association, the fee for service request. We will then be moving into a review of the sewer utility budget, so the operating budget, as well as special initiatives and sewer capital. At that point, committee will have considered the financial plan in its entirety, and we will look to a review of what has changed in terms of the second version of the financial plan that's on tonight's agenda, as well as a discussion regarding the debt financing that is proposed in this financial plan. We will then move to a series of recommendations. Our intention tonight really is to receive recommendations from committee that we can then incorporate into the draft financial plan bylaw that we plan to bring back before you March 14th. And so with that, I'll move into the first item of the night. So as you recall, a couple of budget meetings back, we discussed a high level discussion surrounding the fee-for-service request from the Pacific Center Family Services Association. As you're aware, the city is one of two primary funders, both Colwood and Langford, for the Community Outreach Prevention and Education Program. The city's current funding is $115,000 a year, and we have received a request to increase that funding to $160,000 a year. So this request would result in a 0.28% property tax increase. We have in attendance tonight both Liz Nelson, the Executive Director of the Pacific Center Family Services Association, as well as Julia Leggett, one of the counselors with the Community Outreach Prevention and Education Program. This program is an early intervention prevention program for youth. Currently, approximately 40% of the youth reside in Colwood, and so that is why we're seeing a request for funding that's approximately 40% of the program's budget. And I will turn it over now to Liz to provide a little bit of background as requested by community on how this funding is utilized and why we're seeing the request.
Thank you, Jen. Liz, welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I really appreciate you all taking the time to hear our request. For those of you that are not familiar with Pacific Center's COPE program, as Jen mentioned, it is an early intervention and prevention program for youth ages 5 to 18 and their families. We provide outreach, individual and family counseling, groups, parenting support, and information and educational sessions for the community. Last year, we were so grateful to the City of Colwood as you increased the funding to this program by $40,000. With this increase, as well as a proportional increase from the City of Langford, we were able to hire an additional full-time youth and family counselor who is working collaboratively with the West Shore RCMP, providing preventative services, crisis support, and community resourcing for high-risk youth in the community. Typically, as Jen mentioned, the percentage of youth that access the services through the COPE program has been split with about 40% from Colwood and 60% from Langford. Just before this meeting, I did the math and I looked into our database, and it's actually been a little higher with Colwood this year. So far this year, it's been about 45% from Colwood, about 52% from Langford, and about 3% from the other municipalities combined, which include Metchosin, Highlands, and View Royal. Last year, as the funding, we received it halfway through our year, but we were grateful that it was backdated to the beginning of your fiscal year, which is January. So what we were able to do is actually hire a second full-time temporary counselor to be able to address some of our wait times in our program, which was about 8 to 10 months of wait times. With these two additional counselors, we were able to reduce from 8 to 10 months to about 4 to 6 weeks, which was phenomenal. And as you can imagine, the outcomes were so much better, being able to address these youth in a much more timely manner. So why we're here tonight is we're hoping to be able to make that second position permanent, especially since the RCMP have requested more of our counselors' time to be doing some of that community-based policing and riding along with the officer because the demand is so high and the need is there, that this second position will be able to focus solely on waitlist, on attending to the counseling needs of the youth that access the program. Yeah, and the reason why we were asking for $45,000 as opposed to the 40 that we asked last year is after our ask last year, we actually had a substantial wage increase for our union staff, and we're expecting another one in April. So we were asking for $45,000 as opposed to $40,000, and a similar increase to Langford. We're also reaching out to Metchosin, Highlands, and View Royal for funding requests, which will be much smaller because portion of youth that we see in those jurisdictions is much smaller. I'm going to hand it over a little bit to Julia before I invite questions, just because she can explain a little bit about the work that she's doing with the RCMP in the community.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Julia, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I thought I would just kind of give you a sort of closer focus into what the program actually looks like on the ground. So currently I work part-time, kind of seeing youth more traditionally in a counseling office or outreach, and then part of the time with the police officer bringing trauma-informed youth policing. And so youth can get referred to our program many different ways. They can be referred in a more traditional way by calling directly to our intake line, so through their parents. They can also be connected through the hospital if the hospital is concerned that youth might be at risk of exploitation or criminal activity. They can be referred through the schools. I would say that's actually one of our main referral pathways. We work very closely with Royal Bay. And so we're connected almost all the time there and get a lot of youth flagged through Royal Bay and work closely with the school counselors and the school-based social worker there. And they can also come in contact with the police first. The first point of call might be through the police or through the justice system. And so depending on which avenue they're connected to us really depends on the service that we offer. Obviously, if we meet through the police, our focus is trauma-informed policing and connecting youth to other services. The aim of the team is really to divert youth from the justice system. We really want to make sure that we're early intervention, get connected with youth before these behaviors really escalate, and provide supports that will just give them the chance to have a really rich life that does not involve criminality or exploitation. And so I thought it might be helpful to give kind of a little story, a little snapshot of the work we did with the youth to give you a sense of what it looks like on the ground. So this youth was referred to me by a parent. So they connected first in a counseling capacity. This youth was at high risk of exploitation, particularly sexual exploitation. And so as we got to know each other, build relationship, they felt confident enough to let me know that they were being exploited online. And so they had shared sexually explicit photos and now were being blackmailed by somebody. And so because we had already formed this really trusting connection, this was not a youth that probably would have reached out directly to the police or taken this and let someone else know what was going on. But because we had already formed a bond, a counseling bond, I was able to be that kind of segue for them to get them connected with my policing partner, who is a plainclothes officer. And we're able to offer a real wraparound care for the reporting process. So what that means is introduced the youth to the officer, built confidence in the process. Then we picked up the youth and took them to the CYAC downtown. My understanding is there's one going to open in Langford or Colwood soon, which would be great. That's the Child and Youth Advocacy Center. They have a beautiful soft room there where youth can go to make a recorded report. They have the victim services worker and lots of support there. It's just a very nice trauma-informed way for a youth to make a report about sexual exploitation or sexual abuse. So we took the youth down there. The youth made the report. They did a lovely job, recorded that, brought them back. I'm able to stay in contact with them and provide that follow-up support for them. And I'm also able to reconnect them with the police officer so the police officer can give follow-up. It turned out from a policing perspective that this youth had actually provided information that resulted in a cross-border investigation with the United States, and this person was caught and put in jail. And so I think it speaks volumes to how working together as a team, we're able not just to provide wraparound care for the youth, but we're also able to give them a low barrier access to services. And afterwards, the youth let me know that trust in the police was much increased. We know at the moment, sometimes there can be a kind of defund the police attitude on young people and distrust in the police service. And this is a beautiful way to bring low barrier, trauma-informed, safe policing to young people and build trust in our community services. I don't think I have anything else to add, unless people have some questions or wonderings.
Well, that's fantastic, Julia. And Julia and Liz, thank you very much for all that you do for our community. I know we are exceptionally grateful for the impact that you have on our young folks. So thank you. Thank you deeply. So with that, committee, I'm looking for people that may have questions. I'm not looking for a motion here. That will come under 5.3. And we will go with Councillor Day first.
Thank
Jen,
you.
perhaps you could take down, I'm sorry, Cynthia, perhaps staff, if you could take down the presentation, that would be great. Go ahead, Cynthia, thanks.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you have presented to Langford yet and if they have indicated whether or not they will be supporting?
I'm in the process of reaching out to them. I've reached out to them. Unfortunately, the person who we were working with last year is on parental leave this year, but he did indicate that Langford was going to be willing to give us a similar increase as they did last year this year. So I'm just waiting to hear from them on whether or not they will be open to us presenting to them as well.
Perfect, thank you. And just curious about the new center that's going to be, I'm sorry, I was just looking for the acronym, but I've lost it in my notes, but the Child and Youth Center that's going to be opening at Pacific Center, is that going to be at your location on Well Road?
That's something different. What Julia was mentioning is the Child Advocacy Center, where youth who have experienced sexual assault can be able to make reports in a trauma-informed way. We at Pacific Center are opening a community health center at our location on Goldstream, which is expected to open probably mid-May is where we are tracking with our renovations at the moment.
Okay, and is that where you were speaking of the youth who would be paired with a doctor to be able to follow up with them?
Yes, yes. We're going to be attaching patients we have 6 FTE physicians and 3 nurse practitioners that are going to be starting with us at the Community Health Center. So we're going to be working in collaboration with the COPE program as well as all of our other counseling programs to provide team-based wraparound care.
That's awesome. We would love to hear more about that whenever you're ready. I'm not suggesting that you have to know everything tonight.
We're trying not to advertise it right now because we're already getting bombarded with calls of people looking for a doctor. So we're not widely advertising it at this point until we're ready to start attaching patients. So that's why you're not hearing us talk about it a lot in the community right now, but we are very excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's very exciting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, Cynthia. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hi, Liz, and hi, Julia. I as you know, I'm a personal supporter of the PCFSA. I have personally donated, so I can actually say it's come out of my own personal pocketbook. I am a big fan, but I do have a question right now, and it sort of bothers me a little bit. And you sort of answered it a little bit tonight, because I kind of looked at this when I first looked at the dollar values, and then I looked at what Langford was supplying and what we were supplying. I went, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because I look at if you look at the 5 participating municipalities, the total population, according to the latest census, the 2021 census, is about 85,000, of which we are 22%. And yet we're supplying almost 43% in funding. So it just seemed like, I don't know how you're doing the funding model. And it just seemed kind of strange, but I think you partially answered it. It was because of our demographics, I think, is what I heard. So I guess, so that's my first question. And so I just thought, is that a fair way of doing this? I don't know. And you guys you're the experts at it. But my second question is more concerning to me, was the very fact that we have 22% of the population, yet we've got 40% of the caseload. And I just go, holy crap, what's happening here in our own community? Are we trying to treat the symptoms rather than the root causes? And should we be looking at a different program like under COPE? I don't know. It just was an alarming number. When I saw that, it was an eye opener for me. And so that's my 2 questions. Thank you.
Liz?
I can respond a little bit to how we have requested funding has been more about the usage of the program, like you mentioned. I think there are more young families that live in Colwood and Langford than in the other municipalities such as View Royal, Metchosin, and Highlands as a general rule. And I think that's partly why we do have, the middle school and one of the large high schools in Colwood. And with more young families moving into Colwood, though the actual population may be less, a lot of that is probably young families with youth of the ages that we are seeing in our COPE program.
Okay.
If we were to look at, say, our Better at Home program, which serves seniors in our community, we will probably see less in that community, probably more in View Royal as an example. It's just a matter of where families are choosing to live. It, I think, is why we're seeing those numbers. So I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
I
it
don't
does
have.
make sense. I don't have that deep demographic number, right? But what you're explaining to me makes sense to me. So please go ahead.
Yeah,
Great.
So the second part was just the fact that it's just an alarming number, you know, in Colwood. Like I said, it's just wowzer. And I don't know if, you know, this COPE is supposed to be sort of that preventative measure, right? Before it becomes more serious. But, you know, are we just sort of, again, tackling the symptoms and not the root causes? Should we be looking at something else? I mean, because it's a concerning number to me, actually.
I think it's just sheer population growth. The population growth in both Colwood and Langford has just grown exponentially. We had one and a half FTEs in the COPE program for many years, and we've just increased it now by 2 more. So, which is probably not even keeping up with the population growth and all of the new communities that are being built, which is fantastic for the community to have affordable housing. But a lot of young families are moving out this way because it is more affordable. So I think that's what we're seeing.
And just kind of to add, we meet youth at all different kind of risk levels. So it's not that 40% of youth are at the highest acuity or highest need. Some youth that come are being really identified very soon in their struggles. And we also provide parenting support, which is part of that preventative service. So that early preventative service, supporting parents to be able to support their kids appropriately. But I do think we would like to see, and we've tried in the past, kind of more parenting support and more early intervention stuff. And we do that with some of our other programs too, like that is part of it. But I would say for some youth, the struggles, like, people don't really notice sometimes, like under 12, like they might be coping quite well. And then all of a sudden stuff really starts to bubble up in their teenagehood. And so in that way we are early intervention because they might have flown under the radar until this point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Julia. So again, we'll be considering the increase further on in the agenda.
Okay. Thank you very much for having us.
All right, we will move on to 5.2, report from Marley Bovin on the 2022 sewer user fee review. Marley.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep, you betcha.
Great, thanks, Chair Logan. So I'm actually going to start here because I'm going to be covering the full sewer utility. I'm going to start with a slide that is on page 125 of your agenda package if you are following along with the printout. This is actually the service plan for the sewer utility. As Council may recall, back in the fall, you resolved to maintain the existing service level. So I just want to highlight on this slide the changes from the budget that you saw during the service review in the fall compared to what you're seeing now. So those changes are the total funding is $289,400 higher. That is directly related to the sewer user fee increase that's being proposed based on the recommendation in 5.2, which I will be covering in a couple slides. You'll see that sewer user fee increase based on the staff recommendation. The other increase was in the total operating expenses line. That is $212,400 higher. That is, again, directly related to the CRD sewer maintenance line item that we will be referring to in the next couple of slides, and again, related to the report under 5.2 of your agenda. The final change on this service plan budget compared to what you saw in the fall is the transfer to reserves is $77,000 higher, And that is as a result or directly related to a proposed lift station pump replacement capital program that is new for the first time in this financial plan. So we will be talking about that on a later slide. So unless there's any specific questions related to this slide, I will move on. Great. Oh, yeah. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I didn't notice anywhere in any of the materials on the sewer funding where we're at in terms of capacity and potential needs in the future to add more capacity.
That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, it's not my expertise. So I would have to look to someone in engineering or public works to speak to the capacity of the system.
Yeah, that might be appropriate for maybe a future meeting. Not so much about the funding, but if there's a question about capacity, then staff could probably come back to council with our committee with a report on that.
Yeah, I just think that if I'm reluctant to set our budget without knowing if we need to also be putting money aside for future investments is all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I share the same, and I heard what the chair said, but I guess I share the same concerns that Councillor Day has just mentioned, and I'm specifically about if we're looking at transferring the utility to sewer users, I'm specifically interested in knowing how we're paying for future capacity from a development standpoint and who's expected to pay for that. And I'm trying to, as Councillor Day has said, try to see that within these numbers, because if we looked at what's going to be proposed in the next little bit, is it that the future capacity is being paid by the entire city and all the residents, or just the people who are on sewers?
Good question. Who wants to tackle that one? Marley, I know that you're in a tough spot there. Robert, do you have any comments? Or are you able to weigh in?
Thank you, Chair Logan. Not sure I 100% understand the question. As developers in the community bring on new projects, they are most often responsible to extend the mains and connect new users into the sewer system. When an individual connects, they are responsible to pay those connection fees in already established areas. With respect to the long-term capacity of the CRD system and Colwood's share within that, in 2020, administration brought a report forward to council where we indicated we had approximately 18 years of continued development in Colwood. We have no new information since that report. We haven't kind of recalibrated that metric, but we certainly could if council was desirous to better understand at what point will Colwood's capacity within the broader system kind of be used up in general. We're happy to return with that. But generally speaking, as the system expands, as new users are attached to the system, those users are responsible to expand the system to make that attachment.
May I follow up, Chair?
Yes, you betcha.
When the sewer system was in place in Esquimalt, the city of Colwood had to identify how much capacity we wanted within that plant. So that capacity was purchased for current residents and future development. And so my question is, who's paying for the future development of the capacity that's in Esquimalt presently? Right now, it's paid by all of the city. And what I'm seeing that's going to be suggested this evening is future capacity is going to be paid for by only sewer users. And I'd like some clarification on that.
Would like to weigh in on that, Robert or Marley?
Thank you, Chair Logan. I perhaps administration kind of will return, and I can chat with council offline to better understand the question. I must admit, I'm not fully understanding what's being asked, but we can, I'll ask questions offline and try to develop a body of knowledge that answers the question.
Okay. Jen, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair Logan. I was just looking to seek clarification. Are we referring to how the CRD's requisition and invoicing related to the treatment plant is currently allocated between those sub-regional partners that share in this? Is that the question that's being asked? And that in the future, if there is a change in that allocation, how we're going to fund the change?
That is my question, yes.
So what I can state right now is it is our expectation that within this next 5-year plan, what we have committed to, we will not exceed in terms of the capacity, but in future years, we would absolutely have to return with an analysis on that. But I just wanted to be clear that this conversation we're having right now is how will, if there's changes in capacity, how will that impact the amounts that were requisitioned or invoiced by the CRD? Which, based on Mayor Martin's comment, that is what we're talking about.
Thank you for bringing that together, Jen. I appreciate that. Okay, so Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I think we're still talking somewhat at cross purposes. And because we've got into this conversation, I wanted to bring up a question I was going to leave till a bit later, but why the report on the sewer user fee review is suggesting that both operating and capital, I believe, cost for the sewer system, including the sewage treatment plant, would be transferred from being partly paid by all taxpayers in Colwood to being fully funded by sewer users, is my understanding. And as far as I can see, the report does not say why that is necessary or why staff recommends that transfer. And as I understood Mayor Martin's question, he was asking why, when the capacity that we have are paying for in the CRD sewage treatment plant is both for existing users and for future users who are not connected yet, why is that now going to be paid for entirely by existing users? A decision was made some years ago that it would be paid at least partly by all taxpayers, because there was a sense that all taxpayers have an interest in there being capacity for the future expansion of the city. So anyway, my question is in there, why the change, what's driving that? And I think I've stated Mayor Martin's question as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Who would like to answer that question, Jen or Marty? Jen?
I'll jump in. High level, the reason for the change is to get to a point where the sewer utility is completely funding all sewer related expenditures, both capital and operating. If committee wishes to make a recommendation for staff to return with alternate funding solutions, please do so, and we absolutely can. But you're correct, Councillor Baxter, this report that has brought forward options, whether it be a 1-year, a 5-year, or a 10-year transition, is with the intent of ultimately transitioning these both infrastructure and operating costs to the sewer utility. But if there is a belief that some of the infrastructure costs, because we're not currently utilizing our full commitment on the capacity, If there is a belief that that should be shared by the general ratepayer committee, I recommend, make a recommendation to direct staff to return with alternate information.
Thank you, Jen.
If I could just follow up. So
Yep.
I was kind of looking for the deeper why, but maybe there is no deeper why. So the current arrangement is not either illegal or inadvisable. Is that correct?
Through the chair, correct. That is my understanding. So for a number of years, I believe 2012 or 2013 was the first year that the city was seeing these CRD treatment related expenditures. We have not been financing them entirely through the sewer utility. It has been a split between the general ratepayer and the sewer utility.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Councillor Parkinson.
Thanks, Chair. We seem to be jumping ahead to the sewer user fee review, pages 13 to 15, and I've got some comments on that, but I guess it would be appropriate to let staff sort of work their way towards it. I'm sure that's a lot of the questions relate to the fee review, and let's bring up the appropriate information in front of us if we want to discuss that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Stuart. So I think moving forward, let's complete the report, and then we can ask some more questions. So thank you, Stuart. Marley, please continue.
Thanks, Chair Logan. So my final comment on this slide is that obviously we've been focusing on the sewer user fees and the potential changes as a result of whatever committee recommends to council with respect to whether or not you'd like to see transition of the CRD costs move to the sewer utility. The other item there is sewer connection fees. And as per the budget, the revenue and the expenses equal. And ideally, that's where the actuals come in as well. Staff will be proposing a recommended increase to some of those fees later this month. So I just did want to highlight that we will be bringing a report forward later this month for committee's consideration and recommendation to council. So that's it for this slide. So the sewer utility operating budget. The next two slides do delve into item 5.2 of the agenda. And again, happy for the conversation and the questions that are coming out of this. So with respect to this slide, this is on page 13 to 15 of your agenda package. And as previously discussed with council, some tonight, some during 2021 budget deliberations, and some during the 2022 service plan process. The city's user fee has only funded a portion of the total CRD operating and debt servicing costs related to the sewer related charges. So this chart shows a change from 2016 to the 2021 actuals and the 2022 draft, ranging from just over 880,000 in CRD sewer related charges up to the 1.84 million in 2021 and the CRD draft budget of 1.86 million for 2022. So as you can also see in this chart, the sewer user fee funded anywhere from 13% to 22% of those total charges from 2016 to 2021. And you may also notice that 2016 through 2020 saw the full portion of the CRD operating costs related to sewer funded via the sewer user fee. So it wasn't until 2021 when we saw the full year operating costs of the new wastewater treatment facility come as part of the CRD requisition that the City of Colwood sewer user fee did not fully fund at least the CRD related sewer operating costs. So I will say one more thing about this 2022 draft line, the funded via sewer user fee and the funded via CRD tax levy. Those amounts are both based on the staff recommended option of a 5-year phase-in of 100% of the total CRD sewer related charges. So operating and debt servicing costs being brought in over that 5-year period. So that those amounts would change if a different recommendation was put forward. So that's it for this slide. And then there's another slide which relates to the report as well. So Jen, if you can forward the slide, unless there's something specific that committee had questions on this slide.
No, I think we'll let you finish the report
Okay.
in total, and then we'll go back to committee.
Great, thank you, Chair Logan. So this chart is also included in the report on the agenda, and it just highlights the 3 options that staff analyzed. So we analyzed 3. The recommended option is the phase-in of the 100% of the CRD costs over 5 years, so 2022 through 26. The second option was the phase-in of 100% of the cost over 10 years, 2022 through 2031. And then the third option was 100% of the costs in 2022. So as committee can see here, this was based on the rates that are shown. So, and these rates could be played with. This was just something that staff was able to get enough revenue to cover the phase-in of the CRD expenses for each of these years. I will also say that the assumptions that we used in coming up with these rates for each scenario is that the water usage would remain the same as it was in 2021. The increase in the single family dwelling users each year would be an increase of 7.5%, which was the increase between 2020 and 2021. It was slightly smaller between 2019 and 2020. The increase in the strata users would be constant at a 3.3% increase, and that was the increase between 20 and 2021 and similar to 2019 and 2020. And then the final assumption is that the CRD requisition, so that total 1.86 million would be increasing by 2% per year. The other thing I'll highlight on this slide is that with the recommended option, you'd see the average single family move from $215 in 2021 to $287 of a sewer user fee in 2022. That's with the 5-year phase-in. And that would be somewhat offset by a decrease in the CRD tax levy line, because obviously the more that we fund via sewer user fee would see a reduction in the amount that would need to be collected from the CRD tax requisition line. So that's my comments high level on this slide. And if there's any questions related to this chart or anything else in the report, I'm happy to answer if I'm able.
Great, thanks, Marley. Stuart.
Thanks, Chair. Then I would assume that what Marley was just talking about, that if the price for each user goes up by somewhat, the CRD requisition would go down. And if you weren't connected to the sewer, in fact, your CRD requisition might go down substantially. For instance, if we said 100% went to the users and they paid $549 this year, the CRD requisition on non-sewer users would be reduced significantly. Am I correct in understanding that?
Through the chair to Councillor Parkinson, I would say yes, it may not be an exact an equitable amount dollar for dollar, but yes, if we were, let's say, option 3 to phase in 100% of those costs, then that is I'm thinking off the top of my head because I don't have it in front of me right now. I'll say 1.3 or 1.4 million dollars that would come off of that CRD tax requisition line. So the CRD tax levy line on your tax notice, that would be then funded via the sewer user fee. So the sewer users would see a large increase in their sewer user fee. They'd also see that somewhat offset by their CRD tax requisition line item.
Thank you. I guess the big thing for me is philosophically, I'm trying to think who should pay what. To my mind, the costs of the sewage treatment plant and the, the debt servicing of that makes sense to me that should be all taxpayers paying Colwood's portion of that. And my reasoning for that is it's an environmental project. It's sure not everybody uses it, but then as we've discussed at the table before, not everybody uses all of the services that Colwood provides. But essentially, it was built as a mechanism to protect and enhance the environment. So those benefits presumably would accrue equally to each resident or taxpayer. And the operating costs, to me, would look like they should be for them that use it. If you are connected to the sewer system, you should pay the cost of maintaining that sewer system. And that scenario hasn't been sort of presented here tonight. And again, it may make some sense. I see that in the last chart, it showed how it used to be that 100% of the sewer operating costs were funded by the sewer users within Colwood. And in 2021, that was reduced somewhat. But perhaps they would look at phasing in if council supported that concept, and obviously there's a bunch of other opinions around the table, but supported the concept of the treatment plant financing costs being levied on all taxpayers and the operating costs going to sewer users. There may still be a benefit to phasing in the 100% operating costs. So that's how I would picture this philosophically, and I guess I'd be interested to hear what other members of council think on that concept. Because if they did like my concept, then we'd be sending staff away to do a whole bunch more work, and don't want to do that unnecessarily. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. I don't see any more hands, so I am looking for Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention. I thought it makes. I mean, you need some rationale, and to be quite blunt, the general population has never been asked if they're okay with paying for the cost of the treatment. But in fairness, that is largely how other municipalities who are also a participant in that sewer treatment plant have been dealing with it, which is that the cost of the plant itself was seen as a benefit to the whole municipality, and the cost of the operating was paid for by the users, because the more you use it, the more it costs to fix it. So I think that has some legitimacy in that it is similar to what you would find anywhere else in the city. Not that I'm saying they should set how we do things, but I think it's easier for the public to understand if everybody isn't doing everything completely different than the guy next door. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Councillor Baxter.
I'd just like to point out that the other municipalities within the CRD that use the sewage treatment plant are much more heavily connected in terms of percentage of population to the system than we are. And therefore, following their model would be following a model on the wrong premise. We are not the same as them in terms of our percentage of population connected, and therefore we shouldn't necessarily follow their model. But nonetheless, I like the idea of that Councillor Parkinson originally put forward, which was that the capital cost of the sewage treatment plant is a benefit to the entire community because it was designed as an an environmental benefit, one could argue that the maintenance of the sewage treatment plant therefore falls into the same category. Although Councillor Day is perfectly right that the more people that use it, the more the operating costs are. So that's part of the reason why perhaps that should be users only. And then the operating cost of our own sewers should, of course, be borne by the users. But I just want to get one thing clear, and then I'll wait and see what other people say. And that is that when we talk about the way the sewage treatment plant cost is currently funded, it is not everybody on sewer who funds it, it's everybody in the entire community. That is correct, yes?
Marlene?
Thank you, Chair Logan, through to Councillor Baxter. Yes, so it's partially funded. Yeah, so the capital costs right now are, I would argue, are fully funded by the entire community, as well as a portion of the operating costs, whereas a portion of the operating costs are directly funded by the sewer users.
Thank you.
So Marley, just to get some clarity, if council chose to keep the funding model as is, in other words, status quo, no motion is required. We would just continue charging as we are this year, or 2021.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Logan. I would say the previously approved 2022 amount in the 2021 to 2025 financial plan did see a lift in this year related to phasing in the sewer operating costs from the CRD over I believe it was a 6-year period, 2021 through 2026. So that's what staff would revert to, would be phasing those costs in, because that was the 2022 approved budget. I would recommend that if council does not want to see a change, that there would be a recommendation from committee to council that the same proportion of the CRD sewer related costs are funded by the sewer utility this year.
Okay, just what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Councillor
Sorry,
Logan,
Stuart.
I hate to interrupt. I just wanted to be clear on what Marley was saying. So currently, the plan calls for 100% of the operating costs to be funded by the sewer users in Colwood over the next 6 years, and the capital costs to be on each taxpayer. Is that what you indicated there? I just wasn't 100% sure.
Thanks. Through Chair Logan to Councillor Parkinson. That's my understanding. Without having the notes in front of me, I do believe that the 2021 to 2025 financial plan, and Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, did allow for a phase-in of the operating costs related to the CRD, sewer-related items or requisition to be covered by the sewer utility over that period. And I do see Jen has her hand up, so she can probably add some clarification to that.
Great, thank you. Jen.
Thank you. Just to add further clarifying comment, prior to 2021, 100% of the CRD sewer related operating costs were funded through the sewer user fee. 2021 was the first year that we saw the full financial implications of the wastewater treatment plant on both the CRD requisition and the CRD invoice. 2021, we had brief discussions during budget deliberations about a phase-in. Staff were not provided with explicit direction on whether or not that phase-in included both infrastructure and operating costs. Ultimately, at that time, it was we would return in the future with an analysis on the sewer user fee on how that phase-in could occur. But to be specific, it would be helpful to receive a recommendation on whether or not that phase in should target operating or operating and infrastructure related sewage costs.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Oh, Jen just answered my question actually. So,
Okay.
so we need a motion here of some sort then right now. Well,
Yes.
I'll let Councillor Parkinson or Councillor Baxter make it more eloquently.
Okay. Councillor Baxter, do you have a motion?
I do.
Oh, brilliant. Fire,
I move.
fire away.
I move that 100% of the sewer treatment plant capital cost be recovered across the entire tax base. Okay, so that just deals with capital cost. I suggest we have a different separate motion to deal with operating, just so we can get to vote on those separately.
Very good. Okay, thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor that 100% of the sewer treatment costs be allocated.
Capital
across,
costs.
Capital cost, thank you. Be allocated across the taxpayer. I know staff have got the right wording, so thank you. Discussion, and I see Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a clarification. So when you say capital costs, that's that's interest too then? Is that the whole gamut then? Is that what we're talking about here?
The whole cost of constructing the sewage treatment plant. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Sorry, that clarified my point.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any further hands, I will call the question on the motion. Those that are opposed? I don't see anybody opposed, so the motion passes. Thank you. Councillor Baxter, did you have another motion dealing with the operating?
Yeah. So my second motion with perhaps less chance of unanimity is the same motion, but referencing operating costs, not capital costs.
Okay, so 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for splitting those out. So we do have a motion on the floor. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I cannot support that. Those are people in our community, which is somewhere above 70% of our tax base, also have to maintain and look after a different type of service, which is their septic field and their septic tank, which comes with considerable costs. So if you put the operating costs on everybody, then those people would be paying twice, once for what they actually use and once for everybody else. So that cannot, in my opinion, fly. I could see a small portion of our operating costs being supported by the tax base because it helps with our commercial taxpayers. It helps with our recreational taxpayers. It helps with those institutions who have received a tax avoidance through either a short or a long-term deferral of their taxes, including our churches and many other organizations, affordable housing, etc. So I can see that there is perhaps a portion of the operating costs that it is to the benefit of all in our community that those exist and that we should help, but 100% is too much.
Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia. Councillor Parkinson?
Again, I guess I'm having an off night. I'm just looking for clarity. So, Michael, you're suggesting that 100% of the operating costs be borne by the entire tax base, not
That's
the
correct.
Yeah, operating costs of the sewage treatment plant, not our own operating. Yeah.
So you would separate the operating costs of the sewage treatment plant from the operating costs of the sewers, pump stations, et cetera, to get the sewage to the plant.
Yeah, assuming we can actually do that.
Yeah, I guess I would lump those with the sewer users myself. So I don't think I'll support your motion, Michael.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Jansen. Oh, I see your hand is down. Okay. So we will, Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to staff, I certainly I'm not considering supporting this motion either. But I do want to come full circle just to understand future capacity. And when we purchase future capacity, is there an operational cost to that future capacity? And who's bearing that cost?
Jen, did you want to answer that one?
Certainly. So to directly answer your question, the capacity that the city has committed to drives our share of both the servicing and the operating costs. So those operating costs, it can be argued that there's a portion of the amount of those that is being driven by capacity that we are not yet utilizing. And from what I'm hearing tonight, if there's a suggestion that there's a general benefit of that portion, which I don't have the information in front of me in terms of here's the total capacity, here's what we're utilizing, here's what we're not currently utilizing, staff could return with, of the requisitioned operating costs, here's the proportion that is currently being utilized by sewer users in the city versus here is the portion that is not being utilized.
Thank you. Chair, if this motion fails, I would like to make that motion that Ms. Hempley just mentioned.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Councillor Day, and then I'm going to call the question.
Thank you. Just as that discussion went on, I felt like perhaps we don't have all of the information. I myself was thinking about the cost of the sewer treatment plant and the cost of operating the sewage treatment plant. And my question is, what happens to the costs of the associated infrastructure, the force mains, pump stations, all that, have both capital and operating as well? Are we talking about everything all together, or are we just talking about the sewage treatment itself?
Jen?
Thank you, through the chair. Currently, what we are discussing are the CRD sewage treatment related costs, both the debt servicing or the capital infrastructure costs and the ongoing maintenance costs. On page 14 of 167 or page 2 of 3, that top chart, CRD sewer operating and capital costs, that highlights for us that 2021 was the first year where our sewer user fee did not completely fund all of the CRD sewer operating costs. A discussion about how we are funding infrastructure costs, both those related to the sewer wastewater treatment plant, but also other sewer infrastructure, is a more involved discussion. This item in this report is specifically referring to the core area wastewater treatment plant. You heard staff earlier this evening discuss an increase in what we're transferring to reserves for purposes of our pump station replacement program that we're introducing in this year's financial plan. That piece of the infrastructure is being proposed to be funded through the sewer user fee. Additional infrastructure, whether it be replacement or new, the funding sources have varied. And you've heard staff in recent years highlight when it comes to the sustainability of our sewer infrastructure. We currently don't have a funding plan in place for our sewer related infrastructure in general. The pump station and the fleet is currently what we have a plan in place for, and both of those are being funded by way of the user fee.
Great.
So I will carry on because we have a motion on the table, but I sure would appreciate having all of the pieces of the puzzle in one place before, because I just have this fear that we're going to make a decision based on some very reasonable arguments that don't hold up so well after more facts are known. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I will call the question that's on the floor. Those that are opposed? Mayor Martin, Councillor Kobayashi, Councillors Parkinson, Day, Baxter, and Jansen, and Logan opposed. That motion goes down the toilet. Literally. Mayor Martin, you had another motion?
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize. I didn't say, or I didn't record it as well as Jen, but basically asking to come back with further information in regards to future capacity. Jen, maybe you could help me with the phrasing, please.
Through the chair, recommend that staff be directed to return with further information supporting how the capacity is currently utilized and how the city's requisition for core area wastewater treatment is derived.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. I'm not seeing any hands. So, Councillor Kobayashi?
Yes, please. Just, Chair, thank you very much. I think there's something else added to that too. I want to go back to something the Councillor Day had stated, that there are some, some users of sewage which are public. And I don't know if we can understand that granularly, if we can determine what that is, like City Hall itself and any public washrooms that we have that are on sewer. I think that that's the share I think Councillor Day was talking about. And if we know what that is it 5%? Is it 2%? I don't know. Maybe it's insignificant. But if it's an easy thing to pick out, it would be it would be good to have that in that motion to come back with that.
Okay, I see Jen's hand up. Jen?
Through the chair, absolutely, staff can return. It's important to recognize there are a number of tax exempt sewer users in the city. And so where the city is not recovering these sewer related expenditures directly from the sewer users, there are, for example, our federal properties that are on sewer. We do receive a payment in lieu of taxation, but consider the sewer user fee if it doesn't completely cover the sewer related costs. We are missing out on those properties. West Shore Parks and Recreation Society, for example, and Royal Roads University, that's another example that comes to mind where we're not receiving direct property taxation, as well as if there are any other exempt properties. Those are the primary ones that come to mind. In some instances, we receive payments in lieu of taxation, but in others, we do not. So it's a very important factor to consider. And we can certainly articulate that in writing when we return.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Parkinson?
As always, I'm going to caution about getting down into the weeds here. Looking at how much surplus capacity is in our allocation at the treatment plant, begs the question of how much surplus capacity is there within the pipes that lead to the treatment plant, and who should pay for those, and how much surplus capacity is there within the pump stations, and who should pay for those. I think this is leading to some long-winded and complex analysis that isn't necessary for me. I got to admit that after our discussions tonight, I frankly think staff had it right, that the phase in the CRD operating costs over 5 years, and leave it at that. So I won't be supporting the mayor's motion.
Thank you, Stuart. I will call the question then on the mayor's motion. Those that are opposed? I just see one opposed, Councillor Parkinson. So the motion passes. All right, thank you very much. We will go on to item 5.3, the draft financial plan. And Jen, kind of what I'm recommending is that if you give a brief explanation on the items, then we'll move into the recommendation right away after each subject service area.
Thank you through the chair. Just before we move on, I will turn it back over to Marley just to review the sewer utility related special initiatives and the capital budgets, and then we'll be ready to move off of this item 5.2.
My apologies, you mentioned.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so we have one small special initiative in the sewer utility. This is a carry forward of an initiative that was originally budgeted in 2020. This is the sewer master plan update. There's a small allotted budget for completion of this plan update in 2022. And I will mention that this plan will ideally help provide some context for capital replacement and additional capital, over the next 10 years. So unless there's questions specific to this one item, I'll have Jen switch to the previously approved capital slide, which is the next slide.
Okay. Go ahead. Councillor Day, you had a question?
Yeah, just is the update that we're talking about here, the special initiative to evaluate the replacement plan, is that, would that not be covered under sustainability?
Sorry, through Councillor Logan to Councillor Day. I'm not sure if I fully understand your question. This is specific to the sanitary sewer master plan. Specifics of the plan could be discussed by engineering, one of the members of the engineering team. Can you clarify for me what you mean by covered by sustainability?
Well, we've moved to evaluating almost every item in our budget with a view to setting aside money in reserve funds to ensure that, when we need a new whatever it is, we have the money set aside to do that. I would assume that the sanitary sewer system would be no different in that we have to plan to continually upgrade, replace, repair as time goes on. So this is $5,000 in this year's budget to evaluate the master plan and whether or not, I guess, it needs any tweaks, but I thought that it might be covered in any sustainability initiative that I would assume the city was undertaking.
So Councillor Day, I think this funding was already approved and it's simply a carryover to finish the review that's already underway. So this is.
I see.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And to add to that, Councillor Logan, I think through Councillor Day's explanation, my understanding is that she's probably referring to the Sustainable Infrastructure Replacement Reserve and Plan. And that is something I believe, and Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, that staff will be providing analysis in the future on updates to the transfers to that reserve and what that reserve be covering with respect to replacement of existing infrastructure as we move forward.
Great, thank you. And you had one more slide?
Yes, there's 2 more slides.
2 more slides.
So
okay.
moving into the sewer utility capital program, these are previously approved items under the 2021 to 2025 financial plan. Originally, it was one lump sum budget line item for just over 246,000. Council may recall, or committee may recall, council resolved in the fall to allocate a portion of that budget for expansion in the Painter Trail. So that work will continue and be complete in 2022, as well as expansion on Bexhill Place. And if there's questions, we can answer those, but these were both previously approved.
Great. I don't see any hands.
Okay,
So
great.
that's it.
Last slide. No, one more slide, sorry.
Oh, one more.
So this is, yeah, this is the
Jeez.
new capital program that I was referring to earlier, that is resulting in an increase in transfer to the sewer capital reserve. So this is the newly created lift station pump replacement program. So as approved as a 2022 priority in the 2021 service review, staff are proposing implementation of a replacement program over 10 years. The majority of the lift station pumps are over 15 years old. Some of them have required rebuild and significant downtime in recent years. So the 2 that would be recommended for replacement in 2022 are one of the Ocean pumps and the Wilford Pump Station, one of their pumps. And as you can see, one's 19 years old and the other is 25 years old. If committee would like specifics, someone from the Public Works team can speak to them.
Okay, not seeing any hands, so thank you very much,
Great.
Marley.
Great. That is it for the sewer utility. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. So now we will move on to item 5.3 from the Director of Finance, the 2022 to 2026 draft financial plan. And so over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Chair Logan. So tonight's agenda is publication of our second version of the draft plan, V2, we've been referring to it. My intention tonight, I wanted to take some time to discuss the debt financing that has been proposed under this financial plan. I'll then move into an update on where our draft property tax increase currently sits. We'll review what's changed between when we first met and tonight. And we'll then move into a series of recommendations. So ultimately, either all of the newly proposed services and or newly proposed service increases. We are seeking committee's recommendation on those. Or ultimately, if committee wishes to proceed, or if committee recommends staff return with additional information. And then we will have a review of what's coming up at the next meeting on March 14th. As you recall, when we reviewed the draft capital plan, there are 2 capital works, the Public Works facility and the city's sidewalk and bike lane program. Both of those 2 have debt financing components proposed. At the time, we spoke about how we would return so that we could highlight the implications of this debt financing. And ultimately, should committee wish for staff to return with either alternate funding solutions or to proceed with this funding as proposed, the intention is to have that conversation tonight. And so I wanted to take a minute by highlighting our current debt. You'll hear us refer to liability servicing limits. Ultimately, under legislation, we're required that our annual debt servicing refers to the annual principal repayments and interest repayments on that debt. We are subject to a limit. we look at our recurring revenues. 25% of those revenues bring us to our debt limit. The city is unable to incur debt beyond that limit. Currently, we're sitting at about 16% of that limit. Currently, we have just under $9 million in debt outstanding. The majority of that relates to sewer infrastructure. So we have both the Colwood East sewer area, the Colwood Central sewer area. We have 4 individual loan authorization bylaws relating to debt outstanding for the Colwood Fire Hall. That debt term is near completion. The Bear Mountain Arena, that debt term is also near completion, as well as some road infrastructure works pertaining to the Whale Road Nob Hill area. In addition, we do have approximately $1 million in equipment financing loans outstanding pertaining to 2 fire fleet. Most recently, the T-Rex 57, the truck we refer to with the T-Rex moniker. That brings us to the current balance that we have, approximately $9 million. You'll see over the next 5 years, our limit, it's looking to maintain somewhat steady. So by 2026, it's actually decreased to 13%, despite the fact that we're proposing we take on additional debt. And that is because of the debt that is being retired in each of those years. And I will just jump to the next slide to highlight the specifics of what is being proposed. So currently with the Public Works Administration building, the scoping exercise has begun. The scoping exercise is being funded through the city's surplus. But moving into design and construction, we would be looking to utilize debt financing. We mentioned we wanted to highlight the implications when debt financing is utilized. We will be looking to taxation to fund the annual servicing costs. And so initial estimates, and I must stress that these are initial estimates, as we don't yet know the full scope of what this work would cost. That would be pending the outcome of the design work. But we'd be looking at close to a 1% tax increase. So debt servicing would be about $180,000, $190,000 annually. In addition, the sidewalk and bike lane program, as we discussed when we reviewed the capital budget, 3 primary funding sources for this program. We've got grant funding where available. So we have utilized gas tax. We do seek out any other federal opportunities. We were successful last year on the Machosen Road corridor works. We do look to the DCC program, of course. So some of these projects have a DCC component. And then lastly, we have utilized some surplus funding for design related works, but the bulk of the balance is proposed to be funded through debt financing, which in turn would be serviced through property taxation. High level, there absolutely is a legislative process that we must follow in order to obtain the debt financing. And this process is one that takes a few to several months. We would be looking and would require approval of the electoral base. So city approval would be required. And ultimately, debt is issued through the regional district, and the CRD has 2 borrowings annually. So the deadline for the spring borrowing has just passed. And so if we were looking to move on debt financing, we would be targeting the fall borrowing. And it's really important to highlight that where you do propose utilization of debt, that we cannot commence the capital works related until that approval is in place. So high level, we wanted to highlight these implications and seek any direction, or if committee has any questions, I'd be pleased to answer those or return with further information.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Parkinson.
Thanks, Chair. A couple quick questions. You said that borrowing would require the approval of the citizens. Does that mean a referendum, or does that just, if council has to definitely say we want to borrow? And then the second one, I'll throw it out at the same time because it's easy. In your chart, when you had percent of the limit, and you mentioned that 25% of our essentially income was the most we could borrow, those numbers indicate 16% of the 25% limit, so that it's not like we're close to the limit, where that's with 16% of 25, that'd be like 4% of the total income. Have I got that right, or are we getting close to the limit at 16 and 17%?
Jen.
Thank you, through the chair. With respect to the 25% limit, that 25%, we take 25% of our recurring revenues. So think of it as the revenues that we can consistently rely upon. That is the limit for what we can annually service. So that is not directly the limit for what debt we can incur. So to answer your question even further, right now we're hovering at about 16% of our liability limit, and that's giving us about $9 million in debt. And so 100% of our limit would see access to approximately $60 million in debt financing, so an additional $50 million. That's important to keep in mind. There are, of course, factors that will affect that. So as rates fluctuate, as what we service fluctuates, that will impact that. But big picture, that's the relationship between that 25% limit on what we can repay annually versus what we have access to in terms of the total debt. The second question, it's not a referendum, but it is a similar process. And off the top of my mind, we have not undertaken that process. In my time here, long-term debt that has been issued in the last decade or so has been under previously existing loan authorization bylaws.
You're talking about the alternative approval process, right, Jen, where residents would have to petition the city, 10% of the electorate or more would have to petition the city, and the borrowing would fail. Member serves me right.
Yes, so there's two primary processes, and those factors would need to be met in order for the city to proceed and move along with obtaining the debt by way of specific loan authorization bylaws that would state the amount of the debt and both the purpose for the debt. And I will pause. I
see Robert has his hand up. So Robert.
Thank you, Chair Logan. I was just going to answer the same. So the alternative approval process, formerly known as the counter petition process, the municipality indicates to the community of an intention to borrow. If 10% of the electors sign a petition opposing that borrow, then we would need to go to referendum if we intended to borrow. If 10% or more oppose the borrow, our capacity fails, and so a referendum would be required.
Great. Thank you. I don't see any more hands. Jen, did you require a motion here?
Thank you, Chair Logan. I do not explicitly require a recommendation. If committee is satisfied with the financial plan and with these two components being proposed as debt financing, that is how we will move forward with this financial plan when we return with the financial plan bylaw.
Okay, super. Thank you. So I'm not seeing any hands, so we will move right right into the rest of your report then.
Thank you very much, Chair Logan. So as you'll recall, when we first met, Council as committee was presented with a 5.4% property tax increase for this year. With the publication of this updated draft, we are now considering a 4.81% property tax increase. And I just wanted to take a moment and walk committee through the changes. One of the previously approved service increases was that of boulevard beautification. The draft before you proposes that we defer this increased boulevard beautification service, specifically defer that for consideration at the 2023 service review to be held in fall of this year. February 8th, committee recommended removal of the Colwood cleanup event that had been removed in the draft that was published for tonight. I made brief mention during the presentation regarding our library operating costs. Specifically, since that first draft, we've received updated information regarding our proportionate share of the maintenance costs for the Juan de Fuca branch, and the budget has been updated accordingly. And lastly, since that first draft, as there was further review of the city's debt servicing costs, and what costs, whether or not was a budget required for those, and or if they needed to be amended to our transfer to reserves for sustainable infrastructure purposes. That is one of our policies, ultimately where we stop servicing any existing debt. As that debt is repaid in full, the budget will then see us flip that into a transfer to reserves. So there was minor updates required to that effect. Those four changes brought us to the 4.81%. Last night, council resolved to include the Colwood cleanup event, and so that sees us now just shy of a 5% property tax increase. So tonight, council has been presented with both an updated draft financial plan and also a staff report. The staff report highlights a series of recommendations where we are seeking ultimately council to direct staff on the inclusion or exclusion of these items, or to direct staff to return with further information. I will pause if there's any questions at this point. Otherwise, my intention is to move along into each of those recommendations for committee consideration.
Yeah, Jen, I see Councillor Kobayashi has his hand up, and I just want to clarify too on the Colwood cleanup. Although there's a figure of 27,000 staff, will be going back to identify if there should be an increase in fees, and so that cost and corresponding increase in tax could decrease, right? That could be adjusted down.
Thank you, Chair Logan. You are correct. We will return with staff comment on whether or not a fee increase has been incorporated into the draft financial plan bylaw, and for council's consideration on March 14th. Thank you for clarifying that. This change here was based on the existing budget, which was based on the expectation that the fees would remain consistent with what they were in 2019.
Great. Thank you, Jen. We'll go to Councillor Kobayashi, and then we'll move into the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, Jen, through the chair. I just want to make sure that there was this letter that the mayor had circulated on Monday to us with the RCMP in the back page to 2017, pretty significant number. Is this accounted for in this? Should I have, unnecessarily had high blood pressure on this, or is it an issue, and what impact will it have on our budget?
Jen?
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for bringing this up. We have been aware of the potential retro pay for a number of years since discussions have started. We have incorporated our expectations on the financial implication of the retro pay with quarterly updates in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, no, there is no need to be increasing our operating budget moving forward to support the financial implications of the recent contract settlement.
Okay.
Further,
Thank you.
that has been funded in part through our annual operating budget for policing purposes and where we actualize. We have each year done an analysis over what we expect the retro pay to be liable at the end of that year end, and we have set aside and accrued that liability. It is a funded liability. Now, that being said, we have not yet received the specifics on exactly what we'll be owing. The letter that came in yesterday, we will be reviewing that in comparison to what has been accrued to date, and an update will be coming with the year-end financial update.
Okay, gotcha. That's good. So
Yeah.
I didn't have to lose it on Monday night. My second question is something that I had quickly mentioned to you, and I don't know if this is going to come up later on, if we want to discuss this later on in your process, but it was just that that policing e-com budget line item, which was for $41,000 or $82,000 or $83,000, I think it was, and I know that you've put it in, and I guess I was trying to read through the tea leaves and all that email that the mayor had put us on info on, and I was just trying to read that and try to understand that. I mean, again, the likely, it doesn't seem likely that it's gonna happen this year. That's just my own single opinion, but it's another fairly significant number. So I don't know if we're going to discuss this later. I think it deserves discussion around the council table.
Through the chair,
Yeah.
this is certainly an appropriate time to discuss the policing e-com. You're absolutely correct. The budget is proposing an additional almost $83,000, which is approximately a 0.5% tax increase. Whether or not these costs will actualize this year, staff have not received clear direction on that. You've heard me mention earlier in budget deliberations, some affected municipalities are not funding that increase in year one. That is certainly an option. And if committee so wished, please make a recommendation. To be clear, the draft financial plan before you does factor in funding for this transition effective April 1st, 2022. And there absolutely is a chance that that transition may not occur.
Great. Thank you, Jen.
Do you want me to make that recommendation now or later on, Chair?
Let's hear from Mayor Martin and Councillor Day, and then I'll go back to you there, Doug.
Thank you.
Yeah. Rob? Mayor Martin?
Thank you. So can I just get a clarification on the deferred increased boulevard beautification drop? Are we discussing that in 5.3? Or is this an appropriate time to discuss it now?
Thank you through the chair. There will be an opportunity. I believe it's one of the first couple of recommendations. We'll have a slide dedicated towards that.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait then. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. Just because we're talking about the tax increase, in the report I was reading that the RCMP were, and I quote the report, unable to confirm the budget forecast. I'm not quite sure now that I'm rereading my notes what that was referring to, but it went on to talk about bylaw 1334 from 2010. And I'm just curious because I understood that we were setting aside the extra money each year that we set aside for the RCMP. When we don't have to spend all of it, we've been tucking the excess away in a reserve fund, which I thought we were saving for capital expenditures, like when we need to upgrade the RCMP building. And that it was not operational, it was more related to capital. So I'm just not sure where we are going to discuss that, or why we wouldn't have confirmation of what the budget is for the RCMP.
Thank you, through the chair. So there's a couple of factors that I'd like to highlight. We establish an annual operating budget to fund the RCMP contract costs. At year end, when we are analyzing what operating surplus remains, part of that analysis also includes factoring in the anticipated retro pay that would be owing for that year. And we then set that aside. We have not yet paid out the retro pay that we are responsible for. That trigger has not yet occurred. We then highlight for council the remaining surplus. So what has actualized plus what we anticipate will be owing for the retro pay, given that the contract was under review for some time. We then, as Councillor Day mentioned, we then highlight what the surplus is. And that surplus is either set aside in the RCMP Policing Operating Reserve Fund, or you'll recall that in some years, Council has given specific direction that that surplus be transferred into the policing capital, the police building capital reserve fund. The second part of your question, why do we not know yet the exact cost implications? The RCMP contract was settled August 2021. When this draft financial plan was prepared, we receive a forecast update from the RCMP. To date, that forecast has not incorporated the financial implications of this contract settlement. We have added into our budget estimates on the financial implications of the contract settlement. Those have been highlighted, but that is why I use the words that we have not yet confirmed those amounts. And that letter that has just come this week, that will, one, it's twofold. We need to analyze, looking back, have we sufficiently accrued for the retro pay? If not, how are we proposing we fund that? And then also looking forward, here's what we have included in our draft financial plan. Is that budget sufficient with this increased information?
Great, thank you.
Seeing no further hands, I'll circle back to Councillor Kobayashi. I think you had a motion.
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. Just to get the conversation going on this issue. You know, I'm not stuck on it one way or the other, but I just like to make the motion that we actually defer the $83,000 set aside for the policing e-com, and you know, should something happen, I guess you know, maybe we can fund it through surplus or something. I don't know, but I just want to get the conversation going so that we, you know, we make a conscious decision on this.
Gotcha.
So that's the motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Discussion. Councillor Jansen. Dean, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not overly experienced in these types of budgets, but it concerns me that if the provincial government does all of a sudden dump a big bill on us, that we, you know, we've left ourselves a bit short. But again, to extrapolate that, I believe, I mean, if they were demanding that we pick up that funding, they would have done so by now. So I just wonder if the risk is has lessened given the length of time this taken. I'm not sure if Jen might have a comment on that, or if we're putting ourselves in a poor position.
Well, yeah, unless I'm not sure if Jen's got her crystal ball out, but Mayor Martin may have a little bit of insight too, considering he's been involved in some of the discussions with the mayors and Mayor Sebring. So, Mayor Martin, I'll go to you next.
I don't have any insight, unfortunately.
Wow.
I was gonna ask the similar question of our finance department I to be honest, I think I am supportive of the motion, and I think deferring it is not a huge risk for us, because if I was to crystal ball it, I don't think we're going to get charged this year, but that doesn't mean that that's not going to happen. If we were charged, where would we make this up from? How would we take care of this from a budget
question? Jen?
Through the chair, I appreciate that question. Ultimately, if committee and council made the decision to not fund the ECOM, and if we did in fact receive that charge this year, staff would be returning to council with proposed funding to fund that charge. Specifically, we would first look to our projected spend on the policing operating. Here's what we have budgeted. Here's where we're projecting that spend will actualize. And there may be sufficient funding in that line item. If that was not the case, we would then be making a recommendation twofold. There's a corporate contingency budget that is maintained, or we would offer up for consideration utilization of the RCMP surplus reserve fund, which certainly has sufficient funding to help support this ECOM transition, should council decide not to fund by way of taxation this year, given the uncertainty.
Great.
Thank
you for that explanation.
So, Chair, if I could just do a follow-up, please.
Sure.
So, forgive me, I don't know all the terms for all the funds, Jen, but can you clarify? So, we have never had our full complement of RCMP officers, and then when we don't have that fulfilled for the year, then the extra money that should have been spent on those officers go into, I believe, the building reserve fund. I could be wrong there, but would there be a mechanism for us to move that funding, that if we didn't have a full complement to support the ECOM instead? Or is that what you already suggested with the policy that you said?
That's exactly what she was suggesting in her projection of the spend.
So my question though would be then, legislatively, are we allowed to?
Thank you, through the chair. So technically, are we allowed to? Yes, we establish a policing operating budget to support policing operations. ECOM is a new operating related expenditure for the city. And you're correct. What I would like to take this opportunity to highlight, we have somewhat shifted how we budget for policing operations, given, as you have mentioned, the actualization of the policing strength, how that happens every year, and where we were seeing consistent underages, we would fund our authorized strength, and then how that spend would actualize, and we were seeing annually surpluses generate. In recent years, we have reduced our operating budget somewhat, recognizing that full strength does not actualize because of unpaid absences, leaves, that sort of thing. So the surpluses that we were seeing some years back, they are not generating to that same extent.
Right. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm just a little bit concerned with our motion, because our motion is to defer the $83,000 for ECOM, but it doesn't say when we're deferring it to. I think I would be more comfortable if we were putting that money into a reserve fund somewhere, Although I recognize that we already do have a RCMP surplus and a corporate contingency, and that might be fine, but I'm just wondering, would it be helpful to staff to add any different wording to our motion?
Fair question. Jen?
Thank you through the chair. Certainly, it would be helpful to clarify. The draft financial plan proposes a property tax increase to fund the e-com expenditure. If we wished to not incur an increase to fund that expenditure, a specific recommendation to that effect would be helpful. If we wished to incur the tax increase, but instead fund a transfer to the policing reserve, should that expenditure not actualize, that would be helpful. Or alternatively, should we wish to propose an alternate funding source for e-com, that's a recommendation that committee could make. So yes, specifics would be very helpful.
Okay,
Thank
so
you, Jen.
what
So
I
just to
had
get
meant-
set, yeah, thank you, Doug. Yeah, go ahead.
Councillor Logan, since it was my motion, I thought what I was actually referring to was, yes, poor choice of words. It wasn't actually a deferment. It was actually just not funding it this
Remove it,
year.
yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I just don't believe in overtaxation. Just to have more reserve and surpluses, and I just don't believe in that. It's just not me. So, you
So
know,
we'll change the wording that that amount be removed from the 2022 budget.
correct.
That was allocated to. Okay.
Should that fail, then maybe someone can counter with another one. Okay,
enough.
thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Baxter, and then I'll call the question.
Yeah, based on everything I've heard, I'll be supporting the motion.
Great, thank you. So the motion on the floor then is to remove the amount allocated to the e-com costs. I will call the question now. So those that are opposed. And I don't see anybody opposed. So the motion passes. So that amount will be removed from the budget. Thank you, Jen. Please continue. Jen, I think you're on mute if you're talking.
With that, we'll be moving forward with the series of service recommendations that are before you tonight. So as I've mentioned, we're looking for committee to recommend whether or not to move, or to recommend that staff be directed to return with additional information. And up first, we have the fee-for-service increase for the Community Outreach and Prevention Program that we heard from Pacific Centre Family Services Association on earlier this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson.
I'll move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. I'll lower hands. Discussion? Not seeing any discussion. Those opposed? Oh, sorry, Mayor Martin, are you voting or did you want to discuss?
Yeah, sorry, I just want to confirm that the recommendation that's on screen right now is that whether or not. So it's not clear.
Thank you. I had in my mind that the recommendation is to recommend the increase up to 160,000. Is that correct, Stuart?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mind. I thought you guys were all psychic and you'd figure out what I meant.
Well, I was reading your mind, so I knew
Thank
what
you.
you meant.
Well, good job, Gordy.
Okay, Councillor Jansen, did you have a comment?
No, I had a question.
Well, if you must.
Just some clarity. Are we voting? Is this in perpetuity?
Yes.
Jen, or is this just for this year, or are we going to be looking at this every year? Or how is this looking as we move forward?
Great question through the chair. It's important to keep in mind that we are updating our 5-year plan. So to directly answer your question, yes, this is into perpetuity. Will you have a chance in the future to revise? amounts or the level of support, yes. But that being said, year 2 will start before we get into budget deliberations, most likely. So if committee wished to be specific with direction, if this was just for this year and that we then return, please provide that. Otherwise, we will draft the financial plan, assuming this level of support for the next 5 years.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Kobayashi, then I'll call the question.
Yes, I'm going to be supporting the recommendation. However, there's still one thing that still bothers me. It's just the funding model on this, Jen. And, this could change in a heartbeat. I mean, I'm still concerned by the fact that, we've got 22% of the population, yet we've got 40% of the cases there. That could change, very quickly with the way Langford is growing right now. So, I just believe in a fair way of doing this. And I don't think the way that we're doing this, that this is my only negative comment is, the number of people that they see, and it comes from Colwood or if it comes from Langford, I think it should be based on a better formula that's, tested with time all around, with our West Shore Parks and Rec, with our library requisitions. It's either based on property assessment, total property assessment values, or population or whatever. I just don't like this. So, so in principle, if next year we only have 100 cases, do we get a rebate? Do you know what I mean? It's so that's what the only thing I didn't like about this is how they do the requisitions. So it's just a comment right now. It's just something that I'm asking finance if you could look at that and just keep a guarded eye on it for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. Don't know if it will help, but just from years of experience and working with Family Court and PCFSA, I can tell you that has always been an issue. And what has resulted in every study that has been done, which they've looked at the statistics pretty much annually to look at whether or not what we pay for is what we get. And it has worked out much similar to the way West Shore Parks and Rec has worked out, in that the requisition has very closely mirrored the number of people who are using it. But I just also wanted to remind us that the COPE program is seeking to reduce criminality by providing services early to youth who could potentially have difficulty following the rules, and that crimes are not committed necessarily in the municipality that you live in. So even though we might be helping a youth from Langford or View Royal or Highlands or Metchosin, we may be preventing them from a crime happening at West Shore Parks and Rec.
Great. So those that are opposed to the motion? Not seeing any opposed, so the motion passes. Jen, next one. Okay. So this one's pretty self-explanatory. So looking for a motion to increase the funding for the enhanced branch drop-off or not. Councillor Day? Cynthia?
Sorry, I moved that we increase the, we fund the enhanced branch drop-off.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Kobayashi?
Thank you very much, Chair Logan. Just a quick question for Public Works. And maybe this was asked before, but I just didn't quite understand the answer to this. And if we were to do this increase of essentially doubling the number of events, are we seeing that much more volume then? Or is this just could this be achieved just by scheduling differently? It's just a question I have, and save ourselves $51,000. You let every odd number house do it on these days, and even numbers do it on. I've seen it in other communities now. I'm getting to see how it works. And if we're
Well,
still
let's-
moving the same volume right now, you know, and we're just increasing the numbers and having a 0.31% tax increase, it just makes me scratch my head a little bit. That's all. If it could be if you could do it, achieve it by scheduling differently. That's just a question I have for Public Works on this.
Mr. Boyle, did you want to answer that one, or Mr. Russell?
Well, I'll answer it through the chair unless Mr. Russell decided to put his hand up, but I can't see that he did. So I will try and answer the question. Fair enough, Councillor Kobayashi. The increased funding, we haven't had an increase in volume necessarily in the volume of material that we get deposited. It is the convenience. We do not have the traffic issues that we were having that were constant before. It's a difference between 600 cars in one day and 1,200 cars in one day.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's how it looks. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, it's just the alternatives. Like, we always have these type of problems in private industry, and then we look at it, and if we just did a bit of planning and scheduling around it, we can always avoid these type of things. And so I'm just saying, is there other alternatives for this? And I've never got a satisfactory answer to that. So it's, obviously if the volume hasn't really shifted that much, and I know what the issues are, is that the congestion and all that, but with just different scheduling techniques, you let one side of, the west side of Colwood do it on, and the odd numbers do it on this time. And, if you were just to come up with a scheme, because, it's a lot of money.
I'm not sure how you would regulate that, though, Doug, to be honest
Well,
with you.
you can't.
And enforce it.
You can't, Councillor Logan, at all. And I do understand that. But, most people will play ball. You'll have those odd ones that won't. But it's just a question. And before we, approve $51,000 in expenditures, not against this, but it just seems like have we looked at other alternatives? That's all my question is.
Okay. I see one hand, Councillor Baxter.
As I understand it, we had some very awkward queuing problems with the branch drop-off. In other words, we had too many vehicles coming during the time that the branch drop-off was open, and they were queuing down Wishart. That's my memory of it, and that the increase in time that it's open is to reduce the number of vehicles that come in any given hour and get rid of the queuing problem. It doesn't matter whether they come from odd houses or even houses. It's the number of vehicles worth of stuff that come. And if you only allow people to come every other week, they're still going to bring the same amount. They'll just make more visits on that one day. So I don't see that anybody has put forward a solution other than extending the time. And it would seem to make sense to me that if the problem is the number of vehicles per hour that you can put through the facility without them having queuing down the road, then you have to increase the number of hours. So I'll be voting for this unless somebody can counter what I just said.
I see Robert Earl has his hand up. So Robert, shoot.
Thank you, Chair Logan. And it certainly doesn't address this year, but I can assure Council and Councillor Kobayashi that administration is actively looking at solutions, alternate solutions to weekly service. We recognize this is a service much loved by our community and are looking at ways through the reconfiguration of the Public Works Yard to offer the service in a manner that's at least as cost effective or potentially more cost effective while providing greater service to the community with reduced queuing. And so we're hopeful in the coming year through the Public Works Yard reorganization process to offer alternate solutions to what you have before you tonight. I know it doesn't affect tonight, but I can assure you that we are looking at it.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Jansen?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, I would love to know, are the trips the same for, say, December, January? I mean, do we see, obviously the spring and the summer are going to peak, but is there a need to have the same number of openings in the deep, dark winter months?
Well, I think if I remember correctly, Dean, the proposal would revert back to twice a month for December, January, and February, and then pick up March right through until October, November as every week.
Okay, perfect. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but that sounds deluxe. And then, yeah, thank you.
All right, I'll call the question. Those that are opposed? I don't see anybody opposed, so the motion passes. Jen, next one.
Next up, we have consideration of a further incremental increase to support the improved bike lane maintenance that was introduced last year.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Baxter?
I would like to move that we fund this one and point out that this is 1/20th of 1% of a tax increase.
Thank you, Michael. Any discussion? I'm not seeing any. Those that are opposed? Not opposed, the motion passes. Next one, please, Jen. Green team.
Two areas, parks and trails servicing. The first is whether or not to increase the support in the fee-for-service arrangement with the Greater Victoria Green Teams.
Councillor Baxter?
I'd like to move that we fund this, and I'd like to point out that this is Councillor Logan's fitness regime, joining in with the Green Team.
It certainly encompasses part of it. Yeah, you betcha. Thanks, Michael, cheeky hugger. Councillor Parkinson.
I don't want to deprive you of your fitness, Gordy, but I think this is something that we could explore a bit more, especially with the funding of the volunteer coordinator within the city, that perhaps this is a service that could be brought more in-house than funded through the Green Teams. So I'm not going to vote to automatically renew it at this point.
Thank you. Not seeing any further hands. Oh, I see Mayor Martin, Councillor Daysand. Mayor Martin?
Thank you. I will be supporting it. And just to be clear, it's my understanding as we work through our volunteer, maybe Mr. Earl can comment on this. This would not be something that the city would be taking on as a volunteer opportunity. Can Mr. Earl comment on that, please?
Robert?
The city is still in the process of working through our new volunteer program. Part of the program is likely to support organizations such as Green Team in helping connect additional volunteers to their programming. And so the idea with our program isn't that we would replace existing successful programs, but support them. That said, our program, we're still working through what that might look like, but at this juncture, it is not to replace programs such as this.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thanks. Short and sweet. I think it's good value for money. They have brought a lot of youth in. They've brought a lot of diverse volunteers to our area. So they're doing a great job. Let's not mess with success.
Thank you. And I'll echo those comments, and that the volunteers actually come from far and wide, many from outside of Colwood. And so it's very encouraging and good statement there, Cynthia, value for money. And I think that this certainly provides it. So I'll certainly be supporting it as well. Not seeing any other hands up, I will call the question. Those that are opposed? Not seeing one opposed, Councillor Parkinson. So the motion passes. Okay, Jen.
Moving along, next item in the area of parks and trails maintenance, specifically that of enhanced irrigation systems maintenance for consideration.
Thank you. Someone wish to make a motion? Councillor Day?
I will move that we fund the increased irrigation. One of the things that makes Colwood special is our natural environment, and having irrigation will allow us to support more green spaces to establish without all the invasives.
Great. Thank you for that. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those that are opposed? I don't see any opposed, so the motion passes. All right, Jen, moving right along.
And so with that, we're through review of the increased services and the impact on the operating budget. Staff did receive requests to return with information on 3 primary areas of the capital budget at the February 16th committee meeting. And so before you, staff are seeking committee to recommend whether or not to retain the Dunsmuir Sport Court in the draft 22 to 26 plan as presented, or recommend staff return with further information.
Thank you, Jen. Mayor Martin?
Thank you. I'm prepared to move this motion, but I do have some questions once the motion's been moved.
Okay, so the motion is to
I'm sorry, so it would be that to continue it.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you go ahead and motivate and ask your questions.
Great, thank you. So last time, and I was part of the reason I asked for this to be brought back, I had a concern that we were investing $500,000 into recreational infrastructure, which I think is much needed, but it's around a priority list. And I know a priority list for myself was the skateboard park, and that we have continually waited for grants to arrive, and I'm still prepared to wait for grants to arrive to this year, but I feel like it needs to happen. And I understand that this is a regional thing, and we do have regional investments. It would be a significant investment on the Colwood side. It is a skateboard park that would be within Colwood, though. And so the question I have for staff is the funding model, where this capital is coming from, and would it be possible to achieve both the Dunsmuir Sports Court plus the skateboard park? It is my belief that it's coming out of reserves, but I don't know what the reserve number is.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Jen?
Through the chair, to directly answer your question, currently the financial plan proposes that we support both. That being said, the support for the West Shore Parks and Rec Society skate park remains in the financial plan at the amount initially committed by council, which was the 99,000 and change. If committee recommended an increased contribution for the West Shore skate park, I would need to return with specifics on funding. Depending on committee's direction, that will affect what funding sources are available. But yes, to answer your question directly, yes, we do have eligible funding sources should committee recommend that we increase our support for the skate park, and should committee recommend that we support the sport court.
Okay, so I don't want to mix the two, and I don't want to create a confusion or an either or. But can I just be clear that if I had a further motion past this one for staff to come back with a further report on the skateboard park, would there be a financial implication on taxation? So for example, would it be a taxation lift? Or would this be come out of capital reserves that have been specifically designed for projects such as the skateboard park?
Jen? that would probably be part of your report, I'm assuming?
Thank you through the chair. Staff would not be directly recommending an increase in taxation to support the capital investment in the skate park.
Okay, thank you. So I will, I'll end my comments, Chair, if, after the full discussion and vote on this motion, if you don't mind coming back to me.
Yeah, will do. Thank you, Rob. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you. Just first, I was trying to get your attention a little earlier. I think in the administration and governance section, Jen skipped over the transition to paid on call for the fire department. I'm not sure if there was a reason for that, but if there wasn't, we should maybe discuss that. And on the Dunsmuir Sports Court, my question is, who leads the parade? I mean, who decides what gets built, where it gets built, and who takes the heat if the pickleball court goes too close to existing residences?
Thanks, Stuart. I will say on the fire rescue paid on call, council already made that decision. That we move the response model, being able to, et cetera, on February 14th.
I think we made decisions on all these items. We're just reviewing them, but I don't know if it's in her report tonight.
Well, committee made
the only section of the report that didn't get addressed.
Yeah, Finance Committee made the recommendations and then council actually passed that one. That's probably why there's no decision, but I'll leave it to Jen if you want to comment.
Through the chair, that is correct. Council has made a decision on the fire paid on call on February 14th at the February 14th council meeting. That is why staff have not lifted up that service change for consideration tonight. We have received direction on that item.
Thank you.
We have.
Okay.
And the other question on who takes the heat?
Yeah, Jen, I'm not sure that we could answer that actually. Robert, did you want to weigh in on that if we receive some complaints regarding the pickleball court or sport court?
Thank you, Chair Logan. It's my understanding that this project would be a rebuilding of the existing court facility. And so I think location is determined. I think we would work collaboratively with the school board in determining which uses, including the potential for pickleball on this court. And we would likely suggest some level of consultation with the neighborhood through that process.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi?
Just a quick question through the chair to Jen. Is this in our swimming lane? Because it's on school grounds. It's not usual for a municipal government to do sports courts on school grounds, right? I think that's always been a school responsibility. I'm just trying to understand how, the hows and whys of this right now. That's my only question. Thank you.
This was part of the agreement that we came up with. Sorry, the name escapes me. A memorandum of understanding or something.
MOU, okay.
Yeah, MOU based on a joint meeting that we had. I'm not sure that you attended that, Doug. It might have been during the federal election campaign.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, that's what's happened. That's why. Okay, thank you.
It's sorry, Chair, just to interrupt. I actually have it in front of me. It's the protocol on cooperation and partnership between the School District 62 Souk and the City of Colwood. I will take a photo of the agreement and forward it to all the council.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. Councillor Day and Baxter, do you have something new to add to this, or can we call the question? Councillor Day,
go ahead,
first.
Councillor Day.
Thanks. I just wanted to know what the total amount is. I don't have the whole package in front of me.
Certainly through the chair, this financial plan is proposing a $500,000 contribution of the city's community amenity reserve funding for this purpose, and specifically city funding capital, and the Souk School District under the memorandum would retain responsibility for the maintenance related to this sport court.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out this is a responsible use of funding because we're working with the school district, to both contribute to a project that would be available during school hours for the school and after school hours for the public. So it's a way of providing public recreation facilities at a lower cost and without having to find the extra land for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to call the question now. Those that are opposed? Councillor Days opposed. The motion passes. Mayor Martin, you had a supplemental motion?
I do. The motion is that staff return with report regarding funding options for the remaining portion of the skateboard park.
Thank you. Any discussion? Not seeing any, so I'll call the question. Those that are opposed? None opposed. The motion passes. Thank you. All right, Jen, next.
There was discussion during the capital budget presentation regarding the Colwood Creek, Lookout Lake, and Ocean View Parks improvements that were proposed for 2023 through to 2025. The report before you tonight has brought forth some of the additional information that supports those estimates and the specifics coming out of the individual parks plans. And we are looking for committee's recommendation on whether to keep these projects within the plan as presented or direct us alternatively.
Thank you. Looking for a motion? I will make the motion then that the committee recommend that the park improvement capital projects remain in the draft 2022 to 26 financial plan as presented. Discussion? Not seeing any. Councillor Parkinson?
I'm supportive of the three projects. Again, I wonder at what point there'll be discussion on some of the specifics. I don't think anybody's got the energy tonight, but I mean, in the, for instance, Colwood Creek Park, there's a lump sum allowance, $120,000 for detailed design of a bunch of things, but doesn't seem to include building it. So, the question is, if we're not going to build it, should we design it? And the whole question of how much we spend on washrooms versus do we do more park work? So that's all. I was supportive of the project. I guess lots of time as they proceed to have these discussions, I would hope. As long as that's the case, I'm very happy to support the motion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stuart. And yeah, I agree. I guess we have to allocate some funding in order to have those conversations for sure.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. All right, I will call the question now. Those opposed? Seeing none opposed, the motion passes. Jen, I think the next one is pretty moot, considering you're going to come back and do some with a report on the skateboard park, right?
Thank you, Chair Logan. My understanding from the recommendation that was just made on this item, we will return to council with alternate funding suggestions on how the remainder, being the $679,000, could be funded by the city. I will pause for questions.
Mayor Martin?
Thank you. No, that's exactly what I was hoping for. But I would also like no matter what, to ensure that the city continues on with the 99,900. So I think that motion. However, before we adjourn tonight, Chair, I guess this isn't on this specific thing, but
why don't you hold that thought,
I'll hold it,
Rob, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll deal with this one. Okay, so the motion is that the 99.9 remain in the financial plan for the skateboard park. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, those that are opposed? None opposed, so the motion passes. Rob?
Thank you. So just going back to 5 point, sorry, I believe it was 5.2 or 5.1, or in regards to the lift. The question I had was about the boulevard beautification. and having it pushed back to 2023. And I did ask the question if that would be addressed in 5.3 through the recommendations, but I didn't see that. So I wanted to have a discussion about why that is being suggested to be pulled for this year, and how, I mean, as far as I know, we have not given direction to staff to do that yet.
Okay. Yeah, Jen, whenever you're ready.
Thank you through Chair Logan. Absolutely. That direction has not been given to staff. Following the last committee meeting, the team involved, we did meet and we reviewed the operating budget supporting the city's boulevard services. And as a result of that meeting, it was a staff decision to propose the deferral of that item. But you're absolutely correct. We have not received direction on whether or not to defer that incremental funding. And so if committee wished to make a recommendation otherwise, ask questions of staff, now would be an excellent opportunity to do so.
So, Chair, if I may, I will ask that question. So can staff please explain why they're suggesting that this number be removed?
Thank you, Rob. Jen?
Certainly, I'll jump in and offer initial comment, and then I will absolutely look to the Public Works team to comment on specifics. The Boulevard Services budget, which is not, well, sorry, it is in the agenda package before us. Let me just reference the page number. So we're on page 93 of the draft financial plan. We increased that budget rather substantially in 2021. Those increases did not actualize in 2021. The draft budget initially proposed a further increase of the $60,000 and change in 2022. Upon review of that operating budget, staff were of the opinion that the core proposed budget of $392,000 would be sufficient to move forth with some of the work plan as was discussed during the service review, and that at the next service review, we would be in a better position to articulate the funding required moving forward.
Okay,
but
thank you. Yeah. Mayor Martin, does that answer your question?
Yes and no, Chair. I guess, and I'm happy that we can defer it, and you know that definitely helps from a tax list standpoint. But I guess my question would be that during service review, this was suggested by staff, and now staff are saying no, we don't have the capacity to fulfill what they suggested we do, and I'm struggling with that. And so I guess I'm looking to why. Is it a labor issue? Is it a capacity issue? And why would staff bring it forward to begin with if it's not achievable?
I see our CAO has his hand up, so I'll turn to Robert.
Thank you, Chair Logan, and these are excellent points. In 2020, Council made a determination at staff's suggestion to do a 2-year increase in this area, offering enhanced boulevard services to our community. And Council created a budget in 2021, a lift over 2020 to allow us to begin the first year of that 2-year process. At the end of the day, staff did not ramp up quick enough to be able to deliver those additional services in 2020. And as such, 70,000 of that budget was not spent in 2020. And so the second year of the lift was automatically in this original budget. And so that would mean we'd need to do 2 years worth of lifting in 2022. And the reality is we're probably not capable of doing that. So upon reflection, after listening to the debate at the previous council meeting, a determination was made. We should probably attempt to do in 2022 what we were attempted to do in 2021 to prove that we have the capacity to do it, and then sit down with council at the upcoming service review and chat about our efficacy in this year relative to your expectations.
Great, thank you for the explanation. And so, Chair, I will make a motion that the Boulevard beautification of $62,000 be deferred until 2023.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mayor Martin. So on the motion, Councillor Kobayashi, did you want to speak on the motion?
Yeah, I was going to support that. I was just I took a different tack to this. I was going to compliment staff because I believe what you've done here, and you've went back, looked at, you considered what we said at Committee of the Whole, and you came back and you gave us a reality check. And, you know, and this is believable to me, you know, because I was questioning this. Do we have the capacity? Do we have the capacity? Because I kept on seeing the numbers go up, and yet we had 30 people, and the numbers just weren't clicking in my head. So I'm very happy, and I want to compliment our CEO and staff for going back and taking the initiative to do this. I just have a different opinion on this, so I'd like to thank you very much for it. That's all I had to say.
Thanks, Doug. With that, I will call the question. Those that are opposed to the motion? None opposed, so the motion passes. So, Jen, I think that's it, eh?
Thank you, Chair Logan. I just wanted to highlight the next meeting will be the March 14th council meeting. At that time, we do intend to bring forth an update on the city's reserve funds, as well as an update on grant revenue and the utilization of our COVID-19 Safe Restart grant. And we will then be looking to introduce the financial plan bylaw for first 3 readings on Monday, March 14th. That is all we have scheduled for tonight's budget meeting.
Beautiful, thank you. And thank you, Jen and Marley, for excellent work tonight, and to council. That was really good. So with that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councillor Day, and none are opposed.